I'd like to thank Smithsonian National Museum of American History for presenting the National Youth Summit and providing support for our Regional Youth Summit. The Cerritos Library is proud to be Smithsonian affiliate. I would like also to thank the student, teacher, and administrator from Artesia, Bellflower, Cerritos, Mayfair, and Somerset High School, and Las Flores Home Education Academy for joining us today. I hope you find the summit to be both educational and inspirational. Today's program will begin with National Youth Summit, which will be webcast live from Washington, D.C. After the National Youth Summit, we will take a brief break and then reconvene for the Regional Youth Summit panel. After the panel discussion, Cerritos City Clerk, Vida Barone, will provide information about how to register to vote, and representative from the League of the Women Voter will provide voter registration assistance. In closing, I would like to share a quote from women's rights activist Mary McLean Bethany. We have a powerful potential in our youth, and we must have the courage to change all ideas and participate so that we may direct their power towards good ends. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a question, and you already know the answer to it. Who has the power?
We have the power.
Seriously? Who has the power?
We have the power.
I'm half deaf because I'm old. Who has the power?
We have the power.
And what kind of power is it?
People power.
I am sorry?
People power.
Oh, one more time so they can hear you in Norwalk.
People power.
All right, I'm Greg Lucas, the state librarian, and I'm going to stay out of the way. This is the audience participation part of the program. So it's about all of you. It's about your questions. It's about your input. So if I have to ask a question of the panel that's going to come up here, then something wrong is happening. Just saying. So we're filming this, so don't ask a question before. Someone's got a microphone. Wave. Who has the microphone? All right. And so when you have a question, somebody's going to come and put a microphone in your hand and we'll begin. So I'm going to invite our panelists up, and they're going to talk for a while. I'm going to invite our panelists up, and we're going to talk for a while.
We got the power. We got the power.
You guys are too young, but when they were showing the video from the Smithsonian they said, "Oh, okay, we're going to take a video question from somewhere," and like it was black, the screen was black. See if you can guess this reference: the family Von Trapp. See, right? Okay, thank you. But that's one of my favorite scenes in that whole movie, where the guy is like, "The family Von Trapp," and and they show the photo of the empty door. So, like I say, I'm getting out of the way here, but I'm going to introduce our panel first. Each of them is going to talk for a little bit about the conversation that began with the Smithsonian's webcast about suffragette strategies and tactics and their relevance today. And so we're just going to go like left to right. And so to my immediate left is Michele Beal Bagneris, who is the Pasadena city attorney and also their criminal prosecutor. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And she's been doing that for the better. They're crime fighters. They're pro on criminal prosecution. And so she also exercises her right of free speech and involves herself by being a member of the board of the California League of Cities, which represents the interests of Cerritos and the other 485 cities around the state who are impacted in major ways by what happens or doesn't happen in Sacramento. And next to her is Emiliana Guereca. Say it again? Guereca. Guereca. All right, I should sit down now. Emiliana is an entrepreneur. She's based in Los Angeles. She has a passion for giving back to the community. She's an award-winning event producer, and in 2016, she founded the Women's March LA Foundation, a nonprofit organization, and she's the driving force behind the official Women's March in Los Angeles.
All right.
And at the very end of the table is Dr. Rebecca Dolhinow, who's an associate professor in women and gender studies at California State University, Fullerton. She got a Ph.D. in geography from the University of California at Berkeley, and her MSc in sociology from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Her work takes a look at the intersections of grassroots activism, that's people power, and state interventions. She's worked with and published on immigrant activists and student activists, and her current project is an ongoing ethnographic study of student activism in California in the era of the corporate university. One more time for the entire panel. Michele, do you want to start us off?
Thank you so much, Greg. How's everybody out there? So, I want to tell a short story about perception and reality. So if you have a perception that I'm just one person and I can't make a difference, then that becomes your reality. If you have the perception that I am one person and I will make the difference, that becomes your reality. So when you think about two little boys, 5 years old. We had the girl Naomi, she was 12, but these little boys were 5, and they wanted some candy, and they didn't have any money, so they went to the store and stole some, and the storekeeper caught them, and so he knew they were young. They're still learning right from wrong, so they said, okay, well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to take you to the pastor. So it takes them to the pastor. Pastor sits them in his office, and they sit down, and he says, where is God? And they're like looking, and then he says, where is God? And they're like, I don't know. And says, where is God? And so one of the boys grabs the other one and grabs him and says, let's go. And they went running out. And he said, why'd you make us leave? He said, didn't you hear him? God is missing and they think we took him. Okay, so that became their reality. And we know that's not true, but that perception became a reality. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. Our speakers in the panel talked about how perception matters. When the women suffragettes were in jail and going through all of their problems, how they were perceived in the community ended up making a difference and an impact. They went through whatever the circumstance was, and the perception of what was happening to them, which was reality, made a real difference, and we're still benefiting from that difference today. So when you think about perception, reality, and then you think about the foundations of our country, which revolve around free speech. And it's a paramount right that we have in our country, and as a lawyer and our judicial system, it's there to protect it. Sometimes people abuse it, misuse it. So then they are perceived in a manner that may not get their message across. And I'm going to use a brief example of even my city council meeting last night. We have a community of 145,000 residents. And two guys who are not residents in the city of Pasadena, who live someplace else, decided a few weeks ago that they were going to come and exercise their First Amendment rights in Pasadena at our city council meetings. So they came, and last night a local Girl Scouts organization was seated in the audience, and one of them, during his public comment, decided that he would lace his speech with the F-bomb and with MFer, and this is broadcast on cable, and using the N-word and other slurs. And we have free speech rights. There are limits to those free speech rights. And whatever they were saying got lost If they had a message, they've been there 4 times. I still don't know what the message is they're trying to make, other than I can say whatever I want and I can try to make people look bad. So they're not being successful in my mind in getting something to change, except to have us look at ways to address the rules because we want decorum. Now, on the other hand, we have students who have come, we have Black Lives Matter members who have come. Sometimes they yell, sometimes they do other things to make their point known, but they don't degrade other people. They sometimes follow the rules, and you heard the speaker say, you know, maybe don't follow the rules all the time because sometimes civil disobedience has its place. So we listen when there is something that is communicated, and you communicate in a manner that people will hear what you have to say. And so you think about, and several years ago now, you're in high school now, so you may or may not remember it, unless you're like Naomi and you were all into this when you were 12 and 10. But there was a student walkout that was coordinated across the state and the country. The police, who have great means of detecting what's going on and all that, it came up on them. They didn't know what was going on. It was on the immigration rights issues. The students used social media and these trusty phones that we use that, as she said, can be good and bad tools, but they used it in a way to activate and get other people engaged because they were certainly interested in getting the word out about what's wrong with certain immigration policies. Recently, we've had the marches that deal with gun violence, and the youth are involved. And it started with one person, I don't know who the person was, but in communication with maybe some of their friends, they say, you know, this is wrong, and it's a movement that is developing among our youth, and as you get older, you're going to become the voters. How many of you are 18 already? Okay, good. So, yeah. So you can, you know, register to vote and then vote. A lot of people register and don't follow up with voting because they think maybe I can't make the difference. And when I was in college, I actually happened to be in the same class as Greg at Stanford University. We both graduated in 1980. I don't know if he remembers this, but at the time, there was something called apartheid in South Africa. And that was an institutionalized racism that existed in South Africa.
What's the word?
Apartheid.
No, Johannesburg.
Oh, Johannesburg, that was a song. Johannesburg, that's South Africa, and it was a movement that started locally that ended up going international with how wrong that was. And in California and in a number of other states in the United States, there was a move afoot to do something called divest investments. Hit them where it hurts, hit them in the pocketbook. So take the money out of South Africa that's in America. So there was a rally, a protest by Stanford students where they did a sit-in in the provost's office. So like the administrative office, like the principal's office, they went there and they sat down and they closed, 5 o'clock, business closed, they wouldn't leave. Word got out, so more people started going because they were interested and curious. And so I was curious. Now, I knew that if you stayed after 5, that was trespassing and you were going to get arrested. I was not one to get arrested, but several students got arrested. I forget the number, but it was a large number that got arrested. And they felt so strongly about that matter, that issue, that they were willing to get arrested. It wasn't a felony, it was like a ticket kind of thing. So, but they still exercised their First Amendment to the point that they went beyond and they broke some local laws and they were arrested. And so I supported them. I was there cheering. There were a lot more students outside cheering them on than inside being arrested. And that's all to say that whether you are the kind that is willing to risk getting arrested and whatever consequences come from that, or the kind that wants to support what is going on, there is a place for you. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I was concerned. My parents were concerned. They kept calling. We didn't have cell phones. They kept calling my dorm room, and there was no answer, no answer, no answer. And I finally get back at about midnight, and they're like, the phone was just ringing, and they're like, where have you been? Where? We see it on the news. So things get to the news. And you can be a part of that news, but you need to do it in a manner, in my opinion, that you are heard. And that, yes, you are effective, and recognize that as one person, whether you're supporting the others, whether you have the idea and you're the leader and you get others to participate, you can make a difference, whether it's gun violence and eliminating that, whether it's immigration, whether it's equal rights and the women and men being equal, whatever it is, if you feel strongly enough about it, you can do something to make a difference. And our co-panelists, and I guess I'm probably running on my time, I'm not sure. I don't know if they're even keeping time. But you are, okay, good. So the rules and the laws, as I said, so I'm the prosecutor. And I have a staff of lawyers, so I'm not actually in court doing that anymore. I used to do that a while back. But there are laws. There are laws against jaywalking. There are laws against blocking someone's access on the street or the sidewalk. And there are ways to legitimately have a march or a rally. Sometimes, if you get a permit, they'll close the streets down for you. Sometimes you may not want a permit. You want to just do it on the spur of the moment. You want to be the kind that just communicates through text and Instagram and whatever the other things are that are out there. But know that if you are doing something that is breaking the law, you could get cited. Often they will, if it's a movement and you're participating and you're walking silently and it's like a peaceful march, the police want to cooperate and that kind of thing. But often, if you don't have the permit, you may have seen this, where there's a group and they're walking, they stop at the light. They wait until the light turns green and then you cross. They're still getting their message across. The people driving down the street see the signs that they're carrying. And some of these methods that were used in the past are still effective today. When you carry a sign, people hear what you say. If you're yelling, if you're yelling at the officer, you kind of want to refrain from that. But you want to yell if you want to get your point heard. Now, sometimes you could be considered to be disturbing the peace. So they may tell you, you need to quiet down, you need to be quiet, or whatever, you're in a certain circumstance. But if you use a megaphone or something, so there are different techniques that can be used, and there are rules, and I think a lot of people who organize rallies and marches, they look those rules up. So just like the guys who came to the council meeting and know that they have free speech rights and that there is a limit, they can't disrupt, they can't talk longer than they're supposed to, or they could be arrested. So they talk just until their time is up, and then they sit down, because they know that that could impact their ability to make a statement at the next meeting. So remember that you can make a difference, and I have this other little statement I thought of when they said it, but if in my mind I conceive it, in my heart I believe it, then I know I can achieve it. So I want you to remember that. Thank you.
Say it again.
If in my mind, say it with me, in my mind I conceive it, in my heart I believe it, then I can achieve it. Got it? Mind, heart, achieve. Thank you.
A quick question. Oh, come on.
There's one.
Microphone for this gentleman right here.
Hello, my name is Tenzin Armenta. I'm with Artesia High School, and I just want to know, how do you find the limits on civil disobedience? How do you know you're not going too far on breaking? Because I know civil disobedience is super important. It has a place and has a time, but how do you know those places and times?
Well, as one of our speakers said, push the limit, and you'll find out. Now, you know right from wrong. You know you don't you don't invade someone else's private property and break their windows, paint on their walls. So some things you know right from wrong. So from the prosecutor's perspective, sidewalks are locations where you can exercise your free rights. You can talk, you can yell, you can have signs and that kind of thing. And you can do a little research and pull out the trusty phone and go to Google or wherever you go and say, what are the limits on civil disobedience? And that will give you some guides as well, and maybe some of our March specialists, but we prosecute people if they are breaking the law. So jaywalking is breaking the law, and people say, well, it's just jaywalking, but it's a safety issue. It's dangerous for the pedestrian, it's dangerous for the vehicles, it's dangerous for bicyclists. So some of it is it in your heart, and then the other is what you've been told about sidewalks and jaywalking and red lights and green lights. But it's kind of like civil obedience is marching with the permit and stopping at the lights if you don't have a permit. But I've seen many protests where there's a large group. They didn't get a permit. You don't have to get a permit. You could just get a group of people and get together and make your point known. But from our perspective, you try to follow the law. And don't badmouth the cop in front of his face, which you have a right to do. But at some point, it crosses the line, and you don't want to cross the line, especially with them.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Emiliana? Oh, sorry, go for it.
Can I go next?
Sure.
I don't mean to be rude, but I was supposed to start. Sorry, that's why
I didn't know.
create a presentation. Go ahead. No, it's okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Was there a question?
I don't want to create a problem.
No, I wanted to talk about moving from
Okay, then
marches.
perfect. Go
So
ahead.
I'm Emiliana. I am founder of Women's March Los Angeles, the largest march in the nation. So I can probably talk a little bit about
I guess she's on last.
So you have a freedom of speech and a First Amendment right, but that doesn't mean that you get to step on other people's rights while accessing that, right? So it means being respectful. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I started to organize and why I continue to organize. So I am a first-generation voting immigrant. So I came to the United States when I was 10, undocumented. I am one of 13 kids, seventh child. So I personally have been fighting for equity my entire life. I was supposed to be a boy named after Emiliano Zapata. Hence Emiliana.
Came out as a girl.
Blue when I was a kid. But I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in what was called Cabrini Green. And so when you grow up in that situation, there is no other thing than to fight for your rights on a single day, every single day, right? When you are a person of color living in poverty, you must stand up for your rights every single day. And when we're ready to move out of the community that they call the ghetto, now you gotta fight for housing rights. When you're ready to go to college, now you gotta fight for money. Now you gotta fight for entrance. I am the first in my family of 13 to graduate university, and everyone else after me. You have the power. You have the power. You have freedom of speech. You have the power to fight for social equity, which is the fight that we're in right now. Yes, I fight for women's equity, but I fight for equity for all. There is no women's rights movement without talking about racial justice, without talking about social equity. And that's everyone in this room. So when we talk about free speech, we need to talk about what that means. What is the impact? What is it that you want to achieve? I started organizing for Women's March through Facebook. I reached out to some of the organizers in DC and wanted to know what I could do to help. They were like, we're overwhelmed, you figure it out. So I was not perceived as an activist, but I did not want to get missed. I am a Latina Jewish woman, married to a half-Black Jewish man. So we needed to fight for everyone, right? But the key here is that we are fighting for social justice. We are fighting for social equity. When we talk about March for Our Lives, that particular movement is fighting for gun rights. It is the youth leading that movement. That movement does not start on its own. That movement was Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg emailing Emiliana and Dina Katz in LA because they wanted to figure out, how do they do this? They're 18, 19 years old. How do we go to DC and do this? So we figure out a way to get them there. My first initial email was to Dolores Huerta Foundation, someone that looked like me, someone that had the same fight as I do. Emma's email to me was the same. She was looking for a Latina social activist. I popped up. I personally think that's sad. There should be more people than myself. I'm very new at this. So when we talk about, can you make a difference? Absolutely. You have a skill set. Every single volunteer, and there were hundreds of them for Women's March Los Angeles, had a skill set. Every single one, whether they knew social media, whether they knew how to translate. I have a woman, and she may be in one of my videos, who called and said she did not have any skills. I said, Gloria, you must have skills. I'm speaking to her in Spanish, you know, and she says, well, I'm a taco maker by trade. That's a skill. I don't know how to do that. But she came to the march with her kids and her husband and ended up selling tacos the entire day and ended up on Bono U2's Instagram. But just know that you can make a difference. You have the power to make a difference. You have a skill set. And when you are fighting for social equity and social justice, it's civic activism. The Vietnam War was stopped by students. And there's a place for civil disobedience. There is a place for it, but that should not be your first tactic. Mm-hmm. Your first tactic should be to vote them out. Mm-hmm. Your second tactic should be to run for office. We need our representatives to look the way we look. Look around the room. That's not what our Congress looks like. That's not what our Senate looks like. So when we talk about civic activism, it's not just creating chaos. It may be that. It is also not creating violence at all. It is about strategizing, organizing, voting, running for office, and getting them all out. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Pass the thingy-bobber. Thank you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to kind of skip around in my presentation a little bit because some of it's been covered. Because some of it I want to go off of what you thought of the presentation you saw earlier, okay? So I am really excited to be here today. I want to thank everyone for inviting me. As Librarian Lucas said, I'm Becky Dolhinow. I'm from Cal State University, Fullerton. I also work with an organization called the Orange County Equality Coalition, and we're a nonprofit, and we work with queer kids in schools to make sure that they get equal education, all opportunities, and help them to get equality where they need it in schools. So, activism and social change are my passion and my work. I'm incredibly lucky to get to do what I do on a daily basis, and so I was asked today to talk about sort of tactics and what youth are doing today. So, I want to talk about just not what you can learn from the women's suffrage movement, but also what you can learn not to do from the women's suffrage movement. And first one I want to ask you a little bit about was, and I want you to be really honest here, how many of you really liked the presentation, the national one? Anybody want to put your hand up? That was with Dolores Huerta and Naomi, and yeah, really liked it? Honest here. How many people were troubled at times or had questions that they weren't sure about by what was going on? Anybody? I see a couple hands. Okay. It's okay to be that way. Any presentation you see, you're going to love and then wonder about. So when I watched it, there were parts that I thought were amazing, and there were parts that really kind of bothered me a little bit, and I want to address that today. So, but in order to talk about activism, we have to figure out what activism is. And this is where I'm going to be like a teacher a little bit, because that's what I do, right? So what do we mean when we say activism? Everything we've heard about has been activism. The word has been used a million times. So what we've seen mostly, activism is a way to make social change. And there's lots of different forms. There's lots of ways you can be an activist, right? For me, the best way to define activism is to think about what it does. How does it make change? And I take this approach from a colleague who's an ERA activist and an Alice Paul expert, Zoe Nicholson. So when we ask what does activism do, this is my list. You can add to it. So the key mechanisms that I see: it disrupts, it instigates, it distracts you, it unsettles you, and it can trouble you. Sometimes it dismays you, it worries you, it agitates you, it can provoke people. It makes people disagree, it intrudes. Sometimes it's really inconvenient if it blocks the street, for example. It can be irksome, right? So it makes you think, it makes you question. Now, this may sound a little scary, dangerous, maybe even illegal, but I want you to think about it in a different way. Does anybody know a 2-year-old? Have they ever disrupted you? Distracted you? Intruded on your personal space, maybe when you're in the bathroom even? Dismayed you with their demands? Have they been inconvenient, troublesome, or irksome? Exactly, maybe in the period of 5 minutes? Okay. But 2-year-olds are really good at getting their point across, right? They make their demands super clear. Are they dangerous to us in the process? No, usually just to themselves, right? Yeah. And they don't so much scare us as get our attention. I don't want to equate all activists with 2-year-olds, because they're not. Although I've met 2-year-old activists, which I think is awesome. But these things don't need to seem scary. And they don't need to be illegal, though sometimes they are, but that's a different talk, right? But we have to think about how we do this. And these tactics work, these ideas of getting people going. But when you disrupt a person's normal routine, they're forced to think about something. You open up a window for change and perspective simply by getting them talk about or think about a topic they'd never done before. You get people going, as a 2-year-old gets you going, right? They make us question the status quo, think about why the normal is normal, or even question what normal means to start with. And it's only once we get that kind of thinking and questioning going that change can happen. And the suffragettes, they knew this, right? So, some of the things I'm going to talk about here, and a lot of this has gotten talked about already. So, I want to say that the Smithsonian Summit, parts of it were really great and super impactful, and there are parts of it, like I said, that I wasn't as comfortable with, and that's going to become clear. I'm not going to talk about all the tactics. They did a great job in the summit. And of course, you got to check this out over here. This is a beautiful little display as well. I'm going to talk about a few that are easily used today and a few that are a little problematic, okay? So as I said in the summit, what's really interesting here is what the suffragettes did that was different than what had been done before, right? People had done lobbying, they'd done sort of all the correct ladylike ways, to get attention. But what the suffragettes did was they went out there and did things that were more public. And I think it's really important to note here, and you see it in the pictures over here, all except one, which is not from the suffragette time. These are all white women. And you see in all the images, primarily, that we're going to see, except for this one, which I put up here because it is all black women, no white women, right? That this racial segregation was enormous. The suffragette movement was an incredibly racist movement, our U.S. suffrage movement, right? And there are a lot of problems, like the quote that Naomi brought up is a true quote. I would rather lose an arm than march with a black woman, right? That's problematic in so many ways. The movement lacked intersectionality, and Naomi brought that up. Do we know what intersectionality is? Okay, this is an amazing term that we need to know how to use because it's crucial, especially to a lot of us in this room. Intersectionality is thinking about how the different aspects of social and political discrimination work together, right? That could be race, class, gender, ability, because we're all lots of different things, right? We're not just one identity all the time. Sometimes we're a racial identity, sometimes we're a gender identity or a sexual identity, but lots of them can come together and oppress us in different ways. They create the discrimination we experience. So intersectionality talks about how these things intersect, okay? So that movement lacked that, okay? But the suffragettes were willing to be public disruptors and instigators, to be visible. This is what they did that was so amazing and different, right? They picketed in front of the White House. They were part of the public landscape. You couldn't avoid seeing them, right? They're in front of the White House. You can't avoid them. Now, what's really important here is they used what they had. And this is what you all can do. They could sew banners. They could make banners. They could be public. They could put themselves where you can see them. They could do activism that left people agitated and unsettled and ready to rethink things. And they knew the value of this. They could argue their points in the spaces they had access. Public streets, if not politicians' offices. They could control their own bodies and use them to draw attention, right? Whether that was on a street or whether that was renegotiating how they were viewed as political prisoners rather than as criminals, right? By using their body in that way. Okay. I'm changing the slides here. Okay. All right, so what do we learn from this? What can youth, people with limited power, learn from the suffragettes? Well, work on topics you care about. Personal commitment is key. You're not going to get through the hard parts, as was mentioned, without it. Work on topics you can bring to your community. It's easier to educate your peers and neighbors on things that affect them as well. Don't be afraid to stir things up. That's been repeated a lot. Remember, people only change their minds when they're forced to rethink what they consider to be normal and right. Getting them to do that's not easy, and you need their attention. Be persistent, vary your methods. I mean, look at the suffragettes. They did lots of different things from street theater to picketing, okay? Use what you have. You have so much more than you know, right? And that was mentioned before. You have everything you need to create an amazing action, to make change. Make coalitions, and this is what the suffragettes really weren't good at. They didn't make coalitions. And coalitions or groups of different people that come together to make change are crucial. You can find that the change you seek, others seek as well. And when you work with groups, you can pool resources, knowledge, time, and experience, and reach bigger audiences. But to make coalitions, you have to play well with others, so to speak. You have to understand what coalitions mean. You have to be able to collaborate and learn from each other. And what this boils down to is sharing power and redistributing privilege so that everyone is heard equally, but given equitable time and resources. And this is something that came up that I want to make sure that we're understanding. These are important things that the suffragettes did not understand. They didn't understand the importance of coalitions, and they didn't understand the difference between equal and equitable. Is that something we all get? Okay, I want to make sure we all do, so I'm bringing up this like really classic graphic here that everyone's seen a million times, right? But it does it pretty well, right? Some people think all we need is equality. Everybody gets the same thing, we're all going to be great. And other people are like, nope, what we need is equity. Some people have been held back for so long that giving us the same thing is not going to get us where we need to go. We need more to get where we need to go. And thus, you can see equality doesn't work. We need something more. So I'm probably way over here. I'm going to rush ahead, because what I really want to talk to you about is something that my students did, using all of the things that the suffragettes used. They put together this project called Debt Sentence, and they did it in my activism class. And the students come into this class, they are not activists by any means. They come in to study the history, methods, and experiences of activists. They chose a topic that mattered to them, student debt. They all had debt, they were all worried about the debt all the time, and they figured that their colleagues, other students, would understand this as well. And at the time, the Cal State system was negotiating raising fees, and students were worried. The class wanted to be as inclusive as possible, so they came up with stories about all kinds of different students to be an example. And you can see here that different students stood in front of signs, which unfortunately you can't read, And so I'm going to read them to you real quickly. They describe the different kinds of students that experience debt. The first sign says queer student, unsupported by family, homeless, 2 years of student debt. Single parent, works full-time, pays for childcare, 2 years of student debt. Transfer student, works full-time, commutes, 2 years of student debt. On and on. There's a first-generation learner, first student to go to college, started with loans their freshman year, and he's going to graduate in 6 years. And finally, an undocumented student who's a first-generation student as well, didn't get any financial aid, doesn't qualify for the DREAM Act, and holds several part-time jobs. They used signs and presented themselves this way. They had chains, tape, death sentence, sounds like death sentence, of course. People took the time to stop. Administrators came down and talked to us, and the students could express their concerns about what it was like to bear this kind of debt. Students stopped and picked up information. They got in the newspaper. This got attention, just like the suffragettes did, because it was visually striking, and it got information across that was valuable. These are just a few ideas. The important part of social change is taking part, obviously. If you know what you think needs to be changed, you need to find like-minded people, get together and organize, and you may end up finding people who are going to be your community for life.
Right.
Oops, sorry.
What's on your mind? What do you want to know? Oh, come on. Not going to make me ask a question, are you?
You got one.
Hi, I'm Arnell. I'm 18. I'm from Artesia, and I'm a senior. My question is for all three of you. Were there any moments or any events in your life that made you want to become an activist, or was that something you've always had a passion for? Anyone you guys can answer.
Well, I actually went to, you've heard of Crenshaw High School? I went to Crenshaw High School. And when I was in high school, Jesse Jackson, who's an activist, he's slowed down, I think, significantly now, but he came to our school. And he had this big thing at the time of I am somebody. And so it was dealing with, as she referenced, equity and equality. So it was, as African Americans, we were having challenges getting equal treatment in an equitable manner. So that's what kind of got me started with that, I think. That's the first thing that came to my mind. So, and then I went to Stanford, and all these other people were doing this other stuff.
I think for me was seeing my parents not have equity, right? They didn't speak English. We really did not have equity in any sense. But I do remember my mom taking us, all 13 of us, to city council meetings. And she would sit there and listen because this was going to be important to the community. And we'd end up translating, and I don't know if I did a good job of it. But to me, it was the point of view of showing up. And activism isn't just about, like I said, not creating violence, but showing up and making sure that you are seen, that you are heard, that you are counted. So I do remember going to these city council meetings and being completely uncomfortable translating, but it was a way that the community knew we were part of that community and we counted. And then, down the road, my dad started a whole graffiti task force, and it had to do with him attending the city council meetings.
I grew up in a family that was pretty activist oriented, and so understanding about social change and how it happened was something that we talked about a lot. And for me, that was sort of part of just how you lived your life. So that was definitely.
Thank you.
Another question. I have a question for you all. I mean, what are the biggest threats that you see in your life to your freedoms, to your livelihood? Like, I'm almost as old as the suffragettes. Like, the issues, right? The issues for me are different than the ones for you. What is it you're willing to go to be arrested for? Or is there anything? Go for it. How come? What do we need? What do we need to do that's different? The microphone's coming to you now.
Just repeat. What
Who are you and where are you from? What can you say to?
It sounds like you're talking about an intersection of pressure and stress and worry, because are you safe on campus? Just in life, are students safe at school? The issue of the immigration status, and are you safe in that? There's so many different things that put pressure on us, and a lot of it is issues like this that are things that social change needs to happen around. Yeah, that's real.
I would like to say that I've been there. I've had my parents deported, but you can still do something about it. You can still organize, right? You can find an organization that will help you through that process. I mean, I personally found out that I didn't have a social security card until I applied to go to university. I was like, what? A number? like I'm number 7 of 13. But it will be okay. We are all working towards immigration reform. And what you can do is probably talk to someone at ACLU, talk to someone at Churla, right? Have your family meet with someone that can talk through the process with you so that an adult is worrying about that and you're not.
And I just want to compliment you on saying what's probably on a lot of other people's minds. So you're a leader in that. And I know you're it's like, no, I don't want the microphone, but you're a leader. And so own that and take it with you.
Yeah, now that the ice is broken, who's next?
In the back.
Yes, in the back. You have to use the microphone because I can't hear you without it.
Hi, my name is Destiny Mano. I'm from Somerset High School. My biggest thing is right now is the police brutality, and especially the one that happened recently in Philadelphia with a woman in her, she was in her car, she was pulled over with her 4 kids, and one was recording, and she was ripped out the car by a police officer by her hair, and body slammed on the floor. So what I think is that kids are like born to be afraid of police officers, and I think that's what also stops a lot of people from like going to the marches, because they're afraid of, like, some are willing to get arrested, but in the process they don't want to be like, brutally beaten by police officers. So I think that needs to change.
I can speak towards the marches. So I personally handle logistics, and I'm brown. So I made sure that we talk about safety and what that involves. Do we need police? Absolutely, right? But they shouldn't be our first line of defense when we're accessing our First Amendment right, freedom of speech, right? So that is a conversation that you have with the organizers. That is a conversation that you have with the city. That is a conversation that you have with everyone organizing, because yes, that is a fear, right? And I think that if you're brown or black, you probably know of someone that has been brutally attacked by a police officer. However, that does not stop you from exercising your First Amendment right. You can organize without the police, but you must do it strategically. You must go to the city and say, this is how we plan on organizing If police are to be present, they are not the first line of defense. We will have enough volunteers to do this. We will have the Lawyers Guild. Have a plan in place so that you can still do what you want to do.
And I think it's important to, like you were saying, a lot of people you know don't even want to go because they're fearful. So ensuring that the people that you know understand that they should follow whatever the rules are. And often I have seen leaders of marches, as she just referenced, they have to talk to the people participating and say, okay, we don't want this to turn into something else. We want to get our message out and our message across without being hurt if we can. And so to the extent that if you are involved with organizing, yes, coordinate certainly with a police department. Just say, we don't want anyone hurt here. And then when you're not organizing, talk to your friends, and because sometimes you're going to somebody else's march, and they may not have done the same things that Emiliana's organization would have done. So you and your friends, you stay together perhaps. I'm not a march organizer, okay, but but stay together and try to not be antagonistic toward the police. And sometimes, you know, they get like they feel like they're pushed and they go a little too far. Sometimes they go a lot too far. But try to be in as safe a space as you can with the people that you know when you are participating in someone else's event. And then I think also, you know, in your local communities, I think it is important to go to city council meetings. How many of you have ever been to a city council meeting? Okay, the front row. So a few of you. So when you do that, you learn a lot, and then you may connect with someone who is representing the police department or something like that. And they may try to bring you in with the youth. And then, you know, so that relationship building, I think, is important too.
As everyone has said, part of the value of showing up is finding out who your allies are, who are your partners, who's going to be there with you to try and accomplish what you want to accomplish. I'm sorry, Rebecca.
I just want to add one thing. When you go to a march, have a plan, especially if you think anything could happen. Go with friends, as you said, stay, but have a plan. If you get separated, know where you're going to meet. If something does happen, if somebody does get arrested, know who they're going to call, who's going to pick them up. I mean, hopefully that won't happen to you, but have that kind of plan. And if you're not sure how to do that, there are lots of amazing resources online that you can look for, how to make a plan, how to have that kind of information to you so you feel safe and everyone in your group is safe.
Okay, but yes.
Hello, I'm Chloe Garcia from Bellflower, and I'm in 10th grade. So this question doesn't necessarily have to pertain to a specific issue, but how do you initiate change and influence, especially in an unmotivated environment? Thank you.
How do you initiate change?
I think by continuing to do the hard work, by continuing to have the conversations, right? I mean, I can tell you that I receive hateful emails on a daily basis. And my hair did look nice the last time. I had an email, you look awful, your hair looks awful. I was like, that's all you got? That's it? That's it? But continuing to have those tough conversations. I mean, when we talk about suffragists, we have to also confront that they were racist, right? And that we still have a lot to work. We're now facing racism now, and that we still have to confront that. So in order for us to actually affect change, we're gonna get uncomfortable. We're gonna be uncomfortable in order to fight through that, right? I mean, my goal is to put a female president in office. It's gonna be uncomfortable for a little bit, but I think that we need to continue the work, and it does get tough sometimes. The conversations do get heated. I grew up in a very conservative family, and having conversations about racism, having conversations about sexism, and all of that have to continue. They have to continue. It isn't, I can't shut down and they can't shut down because then there's no progress. So moving towards it, and I think nonviolence is key. I think being empathetic to somebody's point of view as well, but definitely continuing to have the tough conversations.
So we're almost out of time. If you could, I'll jaw for like 2 minutes here to stall. So if you have an inspirational quote like the other one ended that you can share. There was a question earlier about civil disobedience and nonviolent protest. So the two best people to read about that are Mohandas Gandhi, of course, and Dr. King. And both of them say much more elegantly and eloquently than this, that if you can't go out and try and change people's minds with love in your heart, you're never going to win in terms of convincing them. And you're not going to be true to yourself or be true to your cause. And so I'd leave you, one of my heroes is Pete Seeger. He's a folk singer, and he lent his voice to a lot of the causes that we've talked about today. And so they had a big birthday celebration for him on his 90th birthday, and he came out to Carnegie Hall and stood at like a little lectern like this. And he said to everyone in the audience that the world is going to be saved by a million small things. And don't ever, you are doing those million small things. All of us in this room, whether we're working together with each other or not, we're doing those million small things.
If your mind can conceive it, in your heart you believe it, then I can achieve it. And you can too.
The same thing as Dolores Huerta. Who's got the power? We got the power. What kind of power?
People power. Yes.
Believe that.
Sí se puede. I'm going to give you a quote from one of the student activists that I work with. And they said that we're not here because you let us be here. We're here because we want to be here. So remember that.
I'm surrendering the microphone to... Oh, of course.
Somebody's phone.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you all. Thank you again. Proud of you. Good afternoon. I would like to thank Greg Lucas, Michele, Beal. Again, I'm going to butcher your name. Can you please say?
Bagneris.
Bagneris. Okay. Dr. Rebecca Dolhinow and Emiliana Guereca for their excellent panel discussion. In recognition of their contribution today, I would like to present each of them with the City of Cerritos proclamation. I would also like to invite my City Council colleague to join me for presentation and photo.
Hey, Rebecca's.
Buenos días, soy Vida Barone, la secretaria municipal de la ciudad de Cerritos. Good afternoon, I'm Vida Barone, the city clerk for the city of Cerritos. I am deeply impacted by your stories. I was also the translator for my family, for my grandparents who have now passed. I introduced myself in both English and Spanish because they are both my native languages. There is more to my story than just what you see on the outside. And I say this because there's more to your stories than is just what on the outside or what people may assume about you. The choices you make every day tell the world who you are. One of the biggest choices you can make to tell the world who you are and what you are about is by exercising your right to vote. My mother and her family came to this country as political refugees. They came at a time where their civil rights were being taken away in their home country. I will always remember my mother saying to me, "We never thought it could happen here." We never thought it could happen here. Once my mom and grandparents became US citizens, they voted in every single election because they did not ever again take these rights for granted. They told the world who they were and what they believed by exercising their right to vote. I'd like to acknowledge Jan Gallup. She's a board member with the League of Women Voters, and she spends her time registering people to vote. She's back here. Let's give her a round of applause. She has the voter registration forms. Pick one up. Take a look at it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid about what it says. Just take a look and be comfortable. She's got plenty. I checked. She and I had a conversation. I have a very brief presentation with some good information about upcoming elections and voter registration. Oh, sure, go ahead. You can always register to vote. You can pick up forms at the city clerk's office here in Cerritos. We're right across the plaza here at the first floor, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. You can also register online. So you can pre-register at 16 or 17 years old, and then once you're 18, you automatically will be registered to vote. And then that becomes really important because you need to be registered to vote a certain time before an election. So you need to be, right now, 15 days before an election, or you can't vote in that election. So the timing could be really important. It is important to pre-register. You have that right. Exercise it. You can go to www.lavote.net. That's the Los Angeles County Register a Recorder, Register of Voters website. You can also go to www.registertovote.ca.gov. That's the California Secretary of State. So you have all of these opportunities. They've got great videos for students. So you can check it out for yourself, inform yourself. Just really quick, for those of you who may be eligible to vote in the Cerritos election, we're going to call the election in September or October of this year. We're going to know who the candidates are by the end of the year, so you can inform yourself. You can go to our city website. You can read about them. Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020 is the statewide primary election, and that will be a presidential nomination election. Really important. This election is so important for everybody to vote in. One thing that makes me sad, and the one way that I can do my part, is to make sure people know when the elections are and know where to get the voter registration forms. I think it was important that you don't just kind of talk about activism. This is an easy way you can be an activist. This is your way to be an activist. It's so easy. It may not be as, interesting as maybe marching, and it may not get you on TV, but it's a way that each and every one of you can be an activist. Easy to do. And then we will know who our new council members are sometime around April 2nd, and then they'll select their mayor pro tem, sometime after April 2nd. A really good council meeting for you to come to will be our July 11th city council meeting, because we're going to have LA County there talking about their vote modernization project. They're going to have electronic voting. They're going to have vote centers where you can vote up to 10 days before the election. Really important information to inform yourself and arm yourself if you're going to be a voting rights activist.